We begin this morning with the president issuing a stark warning and an ultimatum to NATO nations. Come up with billions more for global defense or else. In the president's words, do more or we will do our own thing. I have a great panel here to break all of it down. But first, this all came together earlier this morning. An already rocky NATO summit took on the feel of a cliffhanger, as only the president can do, after members were called into an emergency session. Once behind closed doors, we are told the president took on an aggressive tone, demanding that allies contribute more money to their defense budgets. When it was over, he called a press conference filled with statements that were not true, also known as lies, and then he declared it a great big victory.
I told people that I'd be very unhappy if they didn't up their commitments very substantially, because the United States has been paying a tremendous amount, probably 90% of the cost of NATO. And now people are going to start, and countries are going to start upping their commitments. So I let them know yesterday, actually. I was surprised that you didn't pick it up. It took till today. But yesterday, I let them know that I was extremely unhappy with what was happening, and they have substantially upped their commitment. Yeah. And now we're very happy and have a very, very powerful, very, very strong NATO, much stronger than it was 2 days ago.
Right there, the president of the United States on the world stage, lying to the planet Earth. We have not been paying for 90% of NATO, but the U.S. is one of only 5 countries that have met a pledge to contribute 2% of its GDP to NATO defense spending by 2024. This morning, he said that is going to change.
Everyone's agreed to substantially up their commitment. They're going to up it at levels that they've never thought of before. The 2% was a range, a goal. It wasn't something that they were committed to. Now it's a commitment. There's a big difference, the 2% number. And that's why so many people weren't reaching it or hitting it. It was just sort of like this amorphous number out there. Now it's a commitment, a real commitment.
Liar. NATO countries had already committed to that number back in 2006. And France's Emmanuel Macron says no one agreed to anything above the 2% number. And although the president said the payments would come quickly, it is not clear it would happen any sooner than the already agreed upon target, which is 2024. Nevertheless, the president said over and over that the situation has changed dramatically and that NATO will be better for it. Take a look.
I think it's another very strong ally, as together it's much stronger than, obviously, individual countries. I think it's the way we have it now. I think it's I think NATO got, you know what was happening with spending prior to my getting into office. The numbers were going down. Now the numbers have gone up like a rocket ship. The numbers have gone up a lot, and they've gone up rapidly, and they're now going up further. So I think NATO is going to be very, very effective.
So despite the president's ultimatum and what some allies apparently saw as a threat to leave NATO completely, an administration official tells NBC that the response in the room was positive. The president echoed that sentiment this morning.
I think really that NATO is more put together right now, is more coordinated, and I think there's a better spirit for NATO right now than perhaps they've ever had. This was a fantastic 2 days. This was a really fantastic. It all came together at the end. And yes, it was a little tough for a little while, but ultimately, you can ask anybody at that meeting, they're really liking what happened over the last 2 days.
There's a very good chance those people are relieved, because 3 days ago, they thought the president wanted to blow up NATO.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.